Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss the national birth chart of Turkey. So, this talk is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. So, let's take a look at what we have here. A few words, announcements, and a little bit of orientation, especially if you're new to the channel. So, I have a level 1 Vedic astrology course coming in January 2026. And the deadline for application is the 14th of November, so right around the corner. If you're interested in receiving an application, you can email heartlightastra@yahoo.com for that. Also, auto dubbing is available on this channel, and there's some new languages that have recently been added by YouTube, Dutch, Polish, and Korean, in addition to these other languages that I've listed here. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. If you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. My channel is all about playlists, so this kind of national chart video is in my famous places playlist, so you can check those out. But I have others as well, like bhavas, houses, yogas, planetary combinations, and there are others. So yeah, check out the playlist to find videos. Also, if you like to learn astrology by learning through famous birth charts of people, places, and moments in time, I have a video titled Birth Chart Archive List 2025 where I list all the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. So the newest videos I've posted, in case you missed any, is the Gaura Yoga, which is the shining combination, planetary transit or Gochar for October 2025, Ashwini Nakshatra, which is a lunar mansion, and then the new moon or Amavasya on 21st October 2025, where I also talked about comets or Dhumaketu in Vedic astrology, at least that perspective. And then if you're interested in learning Vedic astrology, I've listed at the bottom of the slide the videos I would look at first to get a really good solid foundation so that you can start learning or at least get more out of talks like this. Okay, so here is the birth chart that I'm going to be analyzing for Türkiye. This is based on October 29th, 1923, 20:30 p.m. in Ankara. And as you can see, right in the last week of October, right now, as I'm recording this, so Türkiye is heading towards its Republic Day on October 29th. So, yeah, I just wanted everybody to get a chance to look at the chart before I start adding my comments and notes and everything. Okay, so here's some arrows and, starting to get into analysis here. So another reason that I was interested in this chart, besides the fact that actually Republic Day for Turkey is coming up this week, is that the chart is very similar to the current sky pattern. So that was very interesting to me. So what are similarities in the current sky compared to this Turkey chart? Well, you can see Rahu and Ketu. Oh, let me back up first. So I use North Indian style charts in my work. This is a North Indian style chart. So the first house is that top diamond in the middle with the moon in it, and it says AS, ascendant. So that's the ascendant first house, rising sign, also known as Lugna in Sanskrit. Okay, that's the first house. The little 3 in the bottom corner. The 3 in the bottom corner refers to the third constellation of the zodiac, which is Gemini or Mithuna in Sanskrit. To get to the other houses, you count inclusively from the first house and go counterclockwise. So that little triangle in upper left corner with the 4 in it, that's the second house. Okay, so you go around that way. So you can see in the third house and directly across from it, the ninth house, we have Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes of the moon. Well, Rahu and Ketu are currently in these two houses. So the fifth house here, the third house here has Leo in it, the fifth constellation, and the ninth house here has Aquarius in it, the 11th constellation. They're reversed, but they have a lot of similar energies. So when I see that, to me, that notes like a similarity. Also, we have this pravraja yoga. So pravraja yoga is, usually they would call it a stellium in Western astrology. The definitions are a little bit different, but Basically, we have this big gaggle of planets in the fifth house here, which is Libra. Okay. Now, we actually just had this, and it just broke up in the last few days. So we literally had this sort of very similar grouping of planets in Libra. Okay, we had Mercury, Sun, Venus, and Mars, and in this one we have Saturn. But except for that swapping between Mars and Saturn, it's very similar. Okay. The other thing is that in that pravraja yoga, the gaggle of planets, you can see that Mercury and Saturn are in the same degree. Like Mercury's just about to cross Saturn there. So we would call that a planetary war, a graha yuddha between Mercury and Saturn. Well, we actually just had last week a planetary war between Mercury and Mars. So again, the Mars, you can just kind of almost swap Mars and Saturn here in this chart, which wouldn't be too far off because Saturn is sitting in the 10th house currently in Pisces, and it's aspecting Virgo, where Mars is currently the 4th house. So a lot of similarities. The other similarity is that last week also, Jupiter, which has been sitting in Gemini for a while, moved into Cancer, okay, which is the 2nd house here. And the aspects of Jupiter are 5, 7, and 9. So by aspecting 5 and 9 houses away, that means currently Jupiter is in a water sign aspecting 2 other water signs, Scorpio and Pisces. And you can see in this chart, Jupiter's in Scorpio, and it's aspecting Cancer and Pisces. So it's really phenomenal, actually, how many similarities are between this Turkiye chart and the current sky pattern, or at least what it was a few days ago. All right, so especially since the Republic Day is coming up, I thought, well, that's quite interesting. So let's get into the chart a little bit now. Okay, so, when you first look at this chart again, when it's blank and, nobody's told you anything about it, like what are, some of the things you would notice first? Well, the first thing I would notice is this pravraja yoga, again, this grouping of 4 planets in the 5th house of Libra, or Tula in Sanskrit, okay? The other thing I always notice about a chart is what is the lugna? What is the rising sign or ascendant like? Okay, what's going on there? So the lugna here is Gemini, which is a dual air sign, meaning there's going to be various ideas, contrasting ideas, that sort of thing. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury represents business, it represents decisions, it represents talk, it represents thoughts. Air signs, again, are all about ideas. And the nakshatra for the lugna here, the rising sign, a nakshatra is a lunar mansion. There are about 27 lunar mansions, and every night the moon passes through a different one. They all have different energies. So the nakshatra for the rising sign here is called Ardra. Ardra is symbolized by a drop of water. That drop of water can be related to a teardrop. So there might be sadness involved here, or at least emotions, very strong emotions. And that drop of water can also be from a storm cloud. So there can be a lot of stormy type of energy, like very quick and fast, and the storm blows through, and then all of a sudden there's clear. The next day is very clear, almost clearer than the usual day. So something very fast, some sort of almost storm or tornado is going on here in the world of ideas. Okay, for Turkey. Okay, so the moon, not just the Lugna rising sign, but the moon is also in this Ardra energy. The moon represents the emotional mind. So that is bringing even more so this idea that there's quite an emotional type of storm going on here, related to ideas. Moon also represents public, and moon also represents things like imagination and nurturing, that sort of thing. So those are things that would be, pretty general for the sort of gestalt of Turkey. Okay, 'cause the first house relates to the physicality. It also relates to the psychology. Okay, so but this moon in Ardra that shifted just not too long before this time. So the time here is 20:30 p.m. again in Ankara. And the moon has only been in Ardra since 1735. So what is that, like 2 hours? 3 hours, yeah. Before that, it was in Mrigashirsha. Mrigashirsha is symbolized by a deer's head, and that's all about like seeking, searching. So most of the day there was a seeking, searching energy of like the mind, of emotions, of imagination. So seeking and searching ideas. Okay. Um, the other thing, yeah, is that the Lagnatia for this chart, so that's the ruling planet for this chart, is Mercury, since Mercury owns or rules Gemini. And Mercury is this planet that's in planetary war with Saturn. So that's even more of like a tumultuous kind of energy, going on there. Um, and in addition to being in war with Saturn, Mercury, if Moon is the emotional mind, intuitive mind, imagination mind, Mercury is the logical, analytical mind. Okay, so both of the mind planets are pretty tumultuous this time. Okay, and then Mercury's in planetary with Saturn. Saturn is about history. It's about structure. It's about delays, about obstacles. But the thing is, Mercury and Saturn are both combust because they're so close to the sun. So these are there's a lot that's not seen in this chart. Okay, because Mercury again is about ideas and thoughts and that sort of thing. So there's probably a lot of, especially on this day when this happened, um, there was a lot of ideas floating around and maybe not so concretized. Okay. And Saturn, you can see, is the owner of the eighth house of deep psychology. It's also the ruler of the ninth house of authority and president. Okay. So you can see with Mercury and Saturn both being combust, there's a lot of, talk and thought and that sort of thing that's hidden here. And possibly also like with Saturn owning the ninth house, this is also like delays and obstacles and like even like a government you can't see, which is true actually. Part of the story here is that the night before this day, the 28th, the cabinet for the acting cabinet at that time, they all resigned and were not part of the process of electing the new cabinet. So literally, there was this big sort of like authority dump that happened, you know, on the night before. So basically, within the 24 hours of this 8:30 time on the plane, the 9th of October. And so you can see that, which is what I was looking at when I was looking at the chart. I was like, who's in charge here? Because the Lord of the ninth house of authority and president is combust, so you can't see it. Because the combust planet is so close to the sun, you can't see it in the sky with your eyes anymore. Okay, but that also means that there's going to be deeper internal manifestations of that planet. So with Saturn, it's going to be like structure and longevity. Okay. So, and then the other thing going on the, ninth house, not to get too far off, but the other going on in the ninth house is you can see K2 is there. K2 is the south node of the moon. It's a very like kind of unusual, erratic planet, frankly. So it has this kind of separatist, can be this kind of separatist energy. So between the Lord of the ninth house being combust and in war, and then K2 there, this is actually a very kind of unconventional type of government. Okay. Which you'll see over and over again through the process that created Turkiye on this day. And then also, I think, as a nation, in the place it is, location it is in the world. Okay, so the other thing about Mercury and Saturn, besides being in war with each other, they're in the first degree of the sign, which also makes them unstable. So there's quite a bit of instability in mind and thought, both for the whole kind of process and nation here, but also the government as well. So, and let's see, Mercury and Saturn are in the nakshatra called Chitra. Chitra is symbolized by a gemstone. So there's a lot of actually hidden gems, hidden riches here within, I would say, this process and this nation. Okay. The Lagnatia, the ruling planet for the chart, has also gone to the fifth house, which is a Dharma sthana, which is Dharma means like duty. So the overall kind of again gestalt for the country is one of duty. Okay. And then alongside this Mercury and Saturn that are in war and that are Sunday, so unstable, because I've just crossed from Virgo to Libra here. We have the sun, which is in its debilitation sign. Libra is its debilitation sign. So the sun is also very important because the sun represents literally president, authority, leadership, general health. And it's in Libra, so debilitated. So those things will be compromised. Okay. The other planet in this pravraja yoga is Venus. And Venus, the other thing about sun is in this nakshatra called Swati. Swati is symbolized by new grown grass blowing in the wind. There tends to be a lot of like nervousness and fragility related to that, but also again fragile new beginnings, which makes sense since this is the first day, this version of Turkiye. And then we have Venus here, and Venus is in its own sign of Libra. So all of these planets are going to be what we would call Venus dominated, and Venus is related to the finer things of life, romance, social grace, diplomacy, that sort of thing. And Tula or Libra is related to a marketplace. So a lot of, one of the things I was reading about the background of Turkey is that actually 61% of its economy is based on the service sector. So tourism and, all sorts of different services as well, which again, even the Lugnatia. So even though the Lugnatia of Mercury is unstable because it's in war and it's unstable because it's Sunday, it just crossed signs. We've got this very strong Venus, really, how would I say, like polishing the rough diamond here. Okay. And it is a rough diamond because Mercury and Saturn are, in the sort of gemstone energy, but they're hidden and they're ore. So, and Venus is also the worldly advisor. It happens to be, and also like creativity and arts, fine arts, that sort of thing. And it's in the fifth house of creativity, arts, and advisement. So there's some very strong, very diplomatic advisement going on here. Um, yeah, the other thing is this very strong Venus, since it's the landlord of this fifth house, is going to help pull up the debilitation of the sun. It won't pull it up completely, 100%, but it'll kind of, uh, protect it from going too far off. Okay. And Venus is in the nakshatra at this point. Let me see, 3, 2. Yeah, it's in the nakshatra called Vishaka. Vishaka is like a victory at all costs. So, so there's victory here, even though there's a fragile new uh, kind of leader emerging, and there's clearly some underlying structural issues going on as well. Yeah, so all that from the little gaggle of planets there, the Pravraja yoga. So this Pravraja yoga, all these plants together actually gives a bunch of different yogas. So yogas again are planetary combinations that give meta effects to the chart. So we've got the Pravraja. Pravraja will give a life focus. So that's going to be a focus for the country. Is this fifth house of uh, advisement for creative arts, fine arts, advice, that sort of thing. Also, we have here both a Malavya yoga and a Shasha yoga. That's the Saturn exalted in fifth house and Venus Swa in its own sign in the fifth house. So the Malavya yoga is all about like an even higher level of creativity, and Shasha is even more about like power through, um, structure and governance, that sort of thing. Okay. We also have within this Pravraja yoga, Buddhaditya yoga, that's Mercury and Sun together. That gives like an intelligent combination. We also have a Mongolic yoga in this chart. That's the Mars in the fourth house. That can relate to some issues with relationships. We also have in this chart, again, now we're talking outside of this Pravraja yoga, we have a Kala Sarpa yoga, because we have just the moon on one side of the Rahu Ketu axis, but all the other planets on the other side. Rahu and Kala Sarpa yoga will bring great ambition. We have a Nicha Bhanga yoga. That's the Venus bringing up the debilitated sun. We also have a Chandra Mangala yoga because of the relative positions of Moon and Mars. That's a wealth yoga, especially related to property and land. And then we have solar lunar. Well, we don't have lunar yogas. We have a solar yoga here because Mars and Jupiter are on either side. So Jupiter's probably going to lift it up a bit. Mars may pull it down a bit. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of how these planets are supporting the sun. We also have a Kahala yoga. That's because Mercury itself is not particularly strong. It's actually quite, luckily it's with this very strong swa Venus, because Venus is keeping all these other planets. 'Cause these other planets here, Mercury, again, it's a double weakness here. It's Sunday, actually a triple weakness, right? No, one, two, yeah. Well, it's combust and it war and it's Sunday, so it's a triple weakness here. And then Saturn the same. Sun is debilitated. It's just this like massively strong Venus, again, a social grace diplomacy planet that's holding this all together. If Venus wasn't here, it would be a whole another story, okay? But so Mercury is not strong, but the fact that its landlord Venus is strong brings the Kahala yoga to this chart, which actually creates like a leader type of energy. Okay, so the thing is that Venus is moving into Libra very soon, where Sun is currently, and Sun is debilitated there. Right now, Sun is almost by itself because Mars is moving out, so Sun's going to be there by itself until Venus moves there, and then it's going to help, again, shore up and bring up the Sun and all the things that represents like health and leadership and that sort of thing. Okay, so again, that's just the first overpass for this chart. I just wanted to clarify this last thing I wrote here about Venus holding all these planets together until November 2nd. I was confusing the current sky pattern with the Turkiye chart. So actually, it's true in this particular chart for Türkiye. Venus is keeping, again, all these other, compromised planets for causing havoc, frankly, until November 2nd. So again, just, I mean, so it's like by the skin of their teeth, they ended up, with a good day here, relatively good day here to make this happen. Okay, so what exactly happened on this day? Well, the thing is, again, we have right at the top here Gemini, which is a dual air sign, so different ideas. So what actually happened was this: the two major events that happened was that there was a proclamation for a republic being formed for the country. That was new, especially because this is like, you know, uh, coming up on the heels of the dismantling of the Ottoman Empire, which was absolute monarchy and in addition a caliphate as well. So absolute power to the Sultan, and then he had religious power as well. So this was a republic, that was more democratic essentially. So that was one thing that happened here. The other thing that happened here, so again, Gemini's a dual air sign. The other thing that happened here was this is the election of the first president. So at the time is Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. Okay. So two major events happened here. Two major kind of votes happened. Two ideas emerged and two votes happened. So that's what that Gemini at the top represents. Uh, yeah, and it was actually pretty interesting too because I think this all happened very fast. So apparently the night before, the 29th of October, 1923 date, the 28th of October, a lot of the people who were involved in this process were having dinner, I believe, at Ataturk's house. And that's when some of these ideas came forward. And so he and one other guy, I don't remember the other guy's name, they came up with the idea to write up the articles that were going to be voted on. So that was part of what happened because the reason why this was coming up was that the current structure of the government, which was like again a kind of an ad hoc, to some degree, an ad hoc government that was just trying to like again develop itself to some degree after this major shift and change after the Ottoman Empire fell. Um, there were definitely problems with it. Like somebody would try to resign and then they would suggest a name to succeed them, but then other people who really didn't know the situation of the person would vote for somebody else. So it was just very chaotic. So yeah, so that was one issue that was dealt with, and why Republic was proclaimed. But the other problem was that there was no structure in terms of the articles or the constitution for president. And so actually what happened is in the middle of the day on the 29th here is that apparently Ataturk went because he was a big name because he became famous during the Gallipoli War, which is part of again the uh, shift and change after the World War. And also the other thing is that Turkey ended up Turkey. Sorry, I'm still in the process of calling it Turkiye because I guess officially they changed their name a couple years ago, but everybody I know still calls it Turkey instead of Turkiye, which is the Turkish name. So anyway, Turkey. So Ataturk apparently he was also very responsible as a military leader during the in kind of the independence war of Turkey, protecting Turkey, protecting it from the Allied forces. Because after the World War, the Allied forces basically divided up, and like part of it's supposed to go to France and UK and Italy and Greece and all this sort of thing. And they were still trying to maintain some sort of, you know, specific, uh, Turkish identity here. So anyway, so he went off for about an hour in the middle of this 29th day and wrote up some article related to the presidency. And they voted on that, and then he was unanimously voted because he was such a big figure. He was unanimously voted to be the first president of Turkey. So anyway, I was just like, I mean, I was pretty impressed because I was like, oh, I guess the storm was basically him. It sounds like because there was a lot going on for sure, but he was, it's pretty impressive that like literally within about 24 hours they created the articles and voted on the nation becoming a republic, and then also on a presidency and voted for him unanimously. I mean, it was like, wow. I mean, that is a storm. That's an ideological storm. And there's actually two storms, right? Two storms that happened. So this day could have been important for either of those reasons, but there's actually two major events that happened for the nation on this day. So, yeah. So even though this 20:30 p.m. time, apparently that's from the archives of the parliament that was going on that day. And also, I guess at the time when the moon shifted into Ardra and the voting was happening and, things were actually coming, voted on and that's sort of agreed upon, people were like yelling out and saying, yay, sort of thing. So there was a bit of an outburst here. So that was also a bit of an emotional storm as well. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I haven't heard too many, countries that have come about that way, but everybody's unique. So. All right, so now what I was going to do, that was a general overpass or over kind of general analysis for the chart. Now what I was going to do is go through house by house so we could look at this in a little bit more depth. And then after that, I was going to go through the subzodiac or amshas, the subdivisional charts, so we can learn more. All right, so now I've got even more arrows here, besides, again, the first sort of general impressions on the chart. But again, even just the first general impressions, you get a lot, from it. So again, the Lugna nakshatra is Ardra. So again, sad, emotional, public storm. I think the other thing that this storm cloud represents is that, he was quite revolutionary. Uh, he basically single-handed, I mean, even on this day, basically single-handedly is what it sounded like. Wrote these articles and got people to agree. I mean, that's pretty amazing, to actually get them written and then pass them through without much pushback. But the thing that was that part of his, philosophy and his vision for the country as a new country was to become very secular and modern, which is a very different direction from what it had been. And so I'm sure there was a lot of public pushback on his very modern ideas. Um, so the moon nakshatra, again, also Ardra, but again, since it's the moon, we're talking about imagination. The other thing is we could also be talking about mental health here, frankly, because the moon is in Ardra, that would potentially signal emotional upset or turmoil. The other thing is we have Ketu aspecting 5 and 9 houses away because it's the Spaz or Saturn is 9 houses away from it. So Ketu brings this unusual, hidden, kind of unique or quirky energy. And that is in the 9th house of authority, government, and president, which reflects on Ataturk. The other thing is that Ketu reflects into the Lugna here. So that means that, there's going to be some pretty unique or, kind of quirky, type of kind of physicality, but also like personality related to the country. And then this K2 is also going to be aspecting this pravraja yoga. So all this advice, like, very diplomatic advice, like holding together all these other compromised planets, there's going to be this sort of like quirky, unexpected kind of energy to it. Which again, it was kind of a, odd story. Um, yeah. And then the sun nakshatra I mentioned is in Swati, so new grown grass blowing in the wind, that's simple. So fragile new leadership, which was again twofold, both the president and the nation as well. The day lord was moon and the hara lord is moon. So again, we keep going back to this moon energy. And oh, I don't think I talked enough about that. So the mental health, the reason why I brought that up is when you get moon with either Rahu or Ketu, or you get Mercury with Rahu or Ketu. Rahu and Ketu on their own can signal like mental health issues like obsession, compulsion, that sort of thing. And when you get the two mind planets, Moon, the emotional mind, or Mercury, the logical mind, with Rahu and Ketu, you can get like that kind of doubles up. So K2 is on both the mind planets. Moon, which is in Ardra, again stormy, and it's also on this very compromised Mercury in this fifth house here. So again, this, the fact that he could think so, it's, just thought of it. I mean, I'm just thinking like, who would do that? I mean, I don't think in the United States it happens like that. Some one person just sits down and like through the night is writing up these new articles that's gonna like provide some new direction identity for a country. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And not just once, but twice. Like that's a lot of output. Um, so this moon and Ardra, like I would say there's probably some hidden troubles, like mental or emotional troubles here, and there were, which I will talk about a little bit later. But this isn't all. I mean, it's like clearly something fast and quick going on here. But you can see with the Lord of the ninth house being combust, at war, Sundi, and K2 being in the ninth house, this is a very compromised ninth house, which again is the house representing government and authority. So, which was the current state of the government. Again, there was that cabinet dumping that happened the day before this. But again, this is going to impact Turkiye moving forward from this date. And from what I was reading, there have been multiple shifts and changes with the government. It's not a very stable government, which you would not expect with a chart like this. Okay. The other thing is that because K2 is not a planet that's seen, it's a shadow planet, it's a Chaya graha, and the Lord of the ninth house is also not seen because of Combus. There's probably some hidden forces, kind of like he was sort of a hidden guy. I guess he wasn't hidden for very long because he became president. He was very, popular and noteworthy president for about 15 years before he passed away. He was like behind the scenes, like basically orchestrating all this, almost like the Wizard of Oz. This moon and Ardra energy can also indicate something like, brainstorming, because moon can indicate like intuition and imagination. And when you get K2 involved there, it's like this even more heightened kind of, visionary type energy. And moon can represent like nurturing, like I mentioned, and K2 can represent foreigners. So again, I think this also potentially, also points in a different way to like nurturing foreigners, like nurturing tourists, because tourism is a big industry in Turkey. So, yeah. Then we have the birth dasha and current dasha. So the dasha period is the planetary period. So the planets listed here were or are active or more influential during the time. So the birth dasha was Rahu, Jupiter, Venus. Rahu is the north node of the moon, also kind of hidden, unexpected, and can be obsessive, but also very ambitious. And it's in the third house here of nonverbal communication. So I think this is Ataturk, and again, I guess maybe there was one other guy, but basically it sounded like it was pretty much all him, who was ambitiously, riding away. Um, Yeah, and it looks like different versions here because the Lord of the third house is this debilitated sun, and it's gone 3 houses away. So it's a Bhavam sun. So meaning like one riding after another. So like an obsessive kind of drafting was going on here. Yeah. And the sun was involved, which again is literally the president. So literally drafting different versions of emerging leader country and also emerging leader president. Um, and then we have Jupiter and Venus. So Jupiter and Venus are the two advisement planets. So Jupiter's more of a spiritual advisor, and Venus is the practical advisor. So just these planets, like very ambitious advising going on here, which you can see to have all this happen within 24 hours is kind of shocking, actually. But again, the stronger of the two is clearly Venus because it's in its own sign. And Jupiter is in a negative house. It's in a friend sign, but it's not particularly strong. Um, I think that's also important in this chart because, one of his clear directions and visions for the country was to become more secular. And Jupiter is more the spiritual advisor. Yeah. The other thing is the Saturn, that's combust, you can't see, represents more like formal, traditional religion. And that's also the Lord of the ninth house, which is not only government authority and president, but religion as well. So it's almost like this sort of like not only ejection of the cabinet members, but also ejection or sort of a hard pass on religious ideology being involved in this process and identity for the country moving forward. Yeah. So the current dasha that Turkey is experiencing is Sun, Venus, Jupiter, Mars. So look, the two advisement planets again. And now we have Sun and Mars, the two leadership planets. Sun is the president, Mars is the commander in chief of the army. So it's going through a big advisement period, and I believe with all the things going on in the Middle East, like ceasefire that's recently occurred between Israel and Palestine, Turkey was involved in that, and so often it seems like because literally also this Gemini energy for the country. That's going to be dual or contrasting ideas. In some ways, Turkey is it's always been known as a crossroads because, again, the Ottoman Empire expanded so far and vast, but it's literally a crossroads. Like it literally bridges, small part of the, what is it, western corner is in Europe, but the rest of it's in Asia. So it's literally a bridge between two continents. But also, like, it's a pretty big admixture of people, some of it more European, some of it more Asian, and so because it's sort of, the nature, you can see from this chart, it's like the nature of it is like a bridge. And so, and with this very strong Venus in the fifth house advisement, it can potentially help bridge, gaps and diplomacies between, like, potentially, I guess more specifically for this country, Europe and Asia, or Europe and the Middle East. Because the culture difference is pretty amazing. But again, the duality of Turkey gives it kind of a special, unique ability to, potentially bring two sides together or understand both perspectives. So, but yeah, what else? Yeah, and so the recreates the current sky pattern. So I went through that on a previous slide if you want to check that out. So chidra grahas here. So these are planets of vulnerability. So Venus twice over. So this was interesting because, again, even though this Venus is doing such a big job, holding these other very unstable planets, together so they don't really go off the rails, Venus is a Chitragraha. So that means that there's some vulnerability here. And if different Chitragrahas can also symbolize like sensitive spots, like literally sensitive spots, like even medically, or like points of pain. So Venus is there twice over as a Chidragraha, and Saturn is as well. When Mercury, Saturn, and Sun are all related to. Now I'm sort of going into like medical astrology, but so Mercury represents the peripheral nerves, Saturn represents the neuromuscular junction, and the Sun represents the central nervous system. So especially when you see these three plants together, this would potentially indicate a lot of pain. And then the Venus, even though the Venus is doing a really big job of holding itself together, is also chidra graha. So I was seeing this chart not just as a chart for Turkiye, but I was seeing it as a chart for Atatürk, the first president, as well. And so, because the ninth house is compromised, because again, this Saturn, the lord of the ninth house is Saturn, and we've talked about that, and Ketu's there. Sun is also debilitated, representing president. I was thinking he was probably really, really sick at this time. And had some mental, emotional health issues and a lot of stress and was going through a lot of pain. So I was looking up his medical history, and apparently he had quite a number of health problems, from different accidents and stuff. He had different kinds of arthritic, broken bones and stuff like that. But also, he had an obsessive personality. He was a very strong smoker and quite a big drinker. He used to drink about half a liter of raka. Raka is it's an alcoholic beverage and is flavored. The name for that is aslan sutu, which is lion's milk, if that gives you an idea. So he would drink like half a bottle of that a day and smoke quite a bit. Um, and I think the stress of him being such a strong leader and doing everything. I mean, he clearly wasn't. He was in the middle. Taking. I mean, writing the articles, getting people to vote on the articles. Again, other people were there and they weren't as significant, but it sounded like it was a one-man show. Um, so anyway, maybe the stress and strain of all this, even though he was obsessive about it, took its toll. But uh, specifically with this day, 20th of October, when was it listed? I was like, he was probably really sick. So I looked at his medical history specifically in this year, and he had 2 heart attacks in November. So basically, within a couple weeks of this, he had 2 heart attacks, which again, I'm not surprised because the fifth house is related to the heart, and Sun is planet representing heart and it's debilitated. And you have Mercury and Saturn, again in war combo. So he actually, despite him managing to accomplish all this, which was impressive, he was probably in a lot of pain, literally, both mentally, and physically, I would say. Yeah, so that was really like, wow, even more intense, That's the Ardra storm energy here. So besides Venus being a chitra graha, Jupiter is also a chitra graha, and Saturn as well. So again, I think another, you could say, like sticking points here would be, again, spirituality and religion. So all of these chitra grahas, relationships, creativity, advising, diplomacy, structure, obstacles, like, and I would say like religion. But he has still made it happen there. Then we have some planets related to wealth or lack of wealth. So the yogi here is Mercury. So that's going to bring, since the, Lagnatia is Mercury, that means that there's going to be some wealth here. Aviyogi is Mars, so that's going to bring lack of wealth. And then the duplicate yogi here is Jupiter. And Jupiter is aspecting its own sign of the second house of like assets. So there's quite a few indications for wealth here. And I think generally speaking, Turkey is considered to be like upper middle class country, compared to other economic entities in the world. But also there would be wealth here through discussion, education, ideas, and news. Losses through arguments and ego. That can be Mars fights. And then also I just listed here sort of randomly, but since we're still in the Lugna here, apparently Turkey is also the 15th largest electricity producer in the world. And again, we have Ardra, Moon, and Ardra, Lugna here at the top. And we're talking, that's all like storm cloud energy, including like electrical, thunder and lightning, so it is like literally, literally a producer of electricity, so it's sort of cute how, the Jyotish works like that. Again, this is all like astrology. I mean, it blows me away. This is all astrology like 5,000 years old and it's still like relevant to today. I mean, it just blows my mind. Anyway, the second house here, the second house lord is the moon, which is again an Ardra, so stormy. It's aspected by Saturn. So it's going to bring obstacles and delays and all this sort of thing to second house issue, which is assets, but also inner circle, like this cabinet that, all resigned simultaneously. But then aspected by Jupiter where it's exalted. So this Jupiter, Jupiter also represents oral communication. The second house is oral communication. So there's some massive, uh, gifted speaker, or golden tongued, individual here. And it's kind of nice in a way that Saturn is combust because it means there's not going to be obstacles or delays. That's why part of this happened so quickly. There are no obstacles or delays outwardly, but the inner obstacles are clearly there. There's clearly a lot of inner turmoil for both the country and the leadership here. Yeah, so then the third house lord is Sun, which we know is debilitated, and Rahu's there in Purva Phalguni, which is also interesting because Rahu is in a star of Venus. So even though it seems like Rahu is kind of off on its own, it's actually still also being helped by this very strong Venus. And there are 4 planets in star Rahu. So, because Moon is in Rahu, the Lugna is in Rahu, Ketu's in Rahu, and I think Swati is also in Rahu. Yes. So, so that also, even though Rahu is not aspecting the chart like Ketu is 5-9 houses away, there's a lot of Rahu energy. So again, that's going to bring an even more like unusual and ambitious energy to the whole chart. Okay. But Rahu here is in the third house of siblings and neighbors. So these are like potentially the countries, surrounding Turkiye. Yeah, and there are some ambitious ones for sure, who there's some unusual actions here, trying to create harmony with neighbors and siblings. So I think on the level of this particular day, this is Atatürk working his magic. But I think generally the country, moving on beyond this day, there are quite a few ambitious neighbors surrounding Turkey. Then the fourth house here, the Lord is combust, war, Sunday, Mercury in Chitra. And then Mars is there in Hasta. So Mars is all about, in Hasta, it's symbolized by hand. So this is like literally taking control. Like it could even literally be military control because Mars can represent military. But Mars also represents land, and fourth house represents property, which is a dual earth sign. So this is like, again, taking 2 lands or merging 2 lands or taking control of, 2 different properties type of thing. This could also literally be, because the Lord Mercury is so compromised, this could literally be an earthquake, which Turkey is subject to quite often. And what is this? What did I put here? Taking control of valuable land, ideas, emerging country, experiencing troubles and division. Yes, that's all true. So then the fifth house I've been talking about for a while here. So we have this Swa Venus, a Venus and Sun sign with the exalted Sunday combust war, Saturn and Mercury, both in Chitra. So yeah, both exaggerated Mercury and Saturn. Saturn is actually stronger because it's in its exaltation sign here. With a debilitated Banga Bhavam Sun and aspect of KT. So unusual emerging president, gifted diplomat, practical advisor. Again, I'm just seeing Ataturk all over this chart. So creative, emotional, not to dismiss the contributions of the other, parliamentary members, but again, maybe it's just the way it was written, or the way that history likes to remember itself. Is like, oh yeah, this one, shining star kind of, created this whole nation in like 24 hours. It's like, okay. But there's like, you can see like emotional and romantic. That's the Venus. Structured architectures, because Chitra, that's gemstone. It's a cut gemstone, so it's like this architecture. And again, Mercury is words, and Saturn is like structure. So it's like structuring words to build a gemstone of a country, or build the architecture of a country and a president, is what we're seeing here in the fifth house. New word plan, another way. And again, all that health stuff. So pain, like arrhythmia, disorder of the heart and health, stress. Clearly, there's internal stress, but under this shiny exterior, which is, I think, his general persona. Ataturk. So yeah. Also here, which I thought was interesting. So reading more about Turkey is that also, like, again, I think it's known for its tourism. A lot of people I know, when they go to Turkey, they're like, "Oh, it's like the best trip we ever had," because the food is good, the people is nice, the hospitality. There's a lot to see and do. I don't know, just spontaneously without me ever asking. They're like, "Oh yeah, it was a great trip." And then the fine arts, so like the textiles, the pottery. I mean, there's a lot there, literature. The other thing I wasn't aware of is that apparently, especially considering it's in the Middle East, and a large majority of the population, I think it's like 95%, are Muslim. Turkey has always been like LGBTQIA friendly. It's never criminalized, same-sex relationships. And apparently, it was the first, I think, Muslim majority country in the world to have like a gay pride parade and stuff like that. And part of that was, again, a remnant of the Ottoman Empire, who I think at the most fined people for something like that. But again, it was never like seen as like a big deal, I guess. So again, that also makes this a very quirky kind of country, given its neighbors, who some of them are, quite conservative, both religiously and then regarding matters like that. So again, there's this, old and new world emergence here going on at the top. And if we look at the other houses here, so all the stuff on the left is the same, and just the stuff on the right is my other notes. So the sixth house here, the sixth house lord is Mars. And then we have a Sunday, Jupiter, and Vishaka here. So victory over enemies, legal issues. The other thing is that Jupiter can represent like fatty material and balance, like equilibrium. And it's in the sixth house here of acute issues. So again, I kept thinking medical stuff. So especially since it's in Scorpio, which can represent like toxic areas, I was thinking like toxic liver toxicity. And Atatürk died from liver cirrhosis, I'm assuming from being an alcoholic. Um, when he was quite young, I think like 57 or something like that. He was a pretty young guy. So, I mean, you could almost see this as a birth chart for him. I was looking around, but apparently, since the transition from the Ottoman Empire to Turkey as a country, there were a bunch of different calendars being used. So there's definitely no exact birth time for him, but even not an exact date. So you could, if you wanted to use this chart and spin it to the ninth house, that would essentially be him. Yeah. So you could do it that way if you wanted to. So yeah, I was just seeing like more medical issues and stuff. The other thing is that the Jupiter is lord of the ninth house of partnerships and also the 10th house of day-to-day activity. So there's some acute troubles here related to those things, but there's also success as well. Then the seventh house here is the Lord is Jupiter. It's aspected by Moon, Mars, Saturn. So partners fighting over structure, engineering, society, public debate, emotional handling of division, or unification, I guess, integration. You could put it that way as well. Then the eighth and ninth houses I took together. The lords of both of them are Saturn, which is Bhavat Bhavam from the ninth house. So it's the ninth lord. It's gone 9 houses away. And the ninth house can represent grandchildren because it's the fifth from the fifth. So this is like generational going on here. The other thing is that is again another sort of unusual kind of quirky thing that Ataturk did and Turkiye did was that he formalized the first Children's Day in the world by any country. So Children's Day is celebrated, I believe, in May. So yeah, so there's a lot of emphasis here, obviously, with all these planets in the fifth house, which also represents children, but also, like, again, the importance of generational, um, how would I say, like, longevity. Yeah. So, what else do we have here? So, but with these eighth and ninth house, but again, deep internal struggle because the Lord's here. I mean, the eighth house is deep psychology, and this Saturn, that's again Sundi at war, like kind of like we're seeing at the top with Moon and Lugna in Ardra with Ketu. Saturn being the Lord of the eighth house of deep psychology is giving about the same kind of energy, and then it's the Lord of the ninth house. So, um, the other thing about the Ketu here in the ninth house is that it's in a nakshatra called Satabhisha, which translates as 100 healers. So if this was more of a natural benefic planet here, I would think that, this might be like, Atatürk coming in and saving the day, which seemed like he did based on what was written there. But it's K2 here. So this is like, again, diseases that, or situations that are hard to heal. And again, the ninth house reflects government, authority, presidents, religion as well. But again, I would say this is like a really hard, almost rejection or hard pass on, um, bringing traditional religious ideology into politics. And K2 again there represents on its own without anything else, represents things like addiction, mental health, which seemed to be the case for Ataturk as highly functioning as he was. But also with this ninth house, I was just wondering, like, who's in charge? You don't see K2 there. It's an unseen planet, and the Lord you don't see. So it seems like there can be a lot of things going on behind the scenes or underneath the veneer, for politics in Turkey. And again, the Saturn is not only the Lord of the ninth house here, but the eighth and the eighth house can be related to scandals, which will be hidden here because Saturn is combust. So I'm sure whenever the country runs Saturn periods or K2 periods, they're going to get more of that, kind of the dark underbelly, of leadership, I would say. Then the 10th house here, 10th house Lord is Jupiter, aspecting its own house, so that's going to, protect it, and then Mars there as well. Jupiter and Jupiter and Mars together can bring legal issues. And then we have the 10th house is Pisces here, so it's a dual water sign. So literally two waters. I mean, this could be like Istanbul specifically, like merging or bridging the Mediterranean Sea with the Black Sea through the Bosphorus Straits, and then protecting over two bodies of water. I think this could also be. I was also thinking about rivers there. I think this could also be the Tigris and Euphrates. But there's a beneficial emotional legal fight here protecting two waters. When I saw the Jupiter, in Vishaka with Mars and Hasta, it's like protecting. I think that's one of the reasons why Türkiye is, and you can see it here in the chart, is important on the global stage, is that, again, it's a bridge. So what was I reading, which really shocked me? Apparently, in NATO, Türkiye has the second largest military presence or something behind the United States. I was like, wow. I know the United States, tends to care about Turkey as a country because it's sort of the last kind of bastion of, I think, Western presence before you get deep into the Middle East. And again, since a lot of the Middle East is very dry, arid, the Tigris and Euphrates run through the eastern part of the country. So we're talking about like the water tap for the Middle Eastern region. I think it's important for that, as well as like being uh, the United States has military base in especially the eastern part of Turkey to keep their presence known in that area of the world. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing here in the 10th house, is that it's part of its kind of reputation as well. Uh, yeah, protecting that area, different different lands and bodies of water. So then the 11th house here, 11th house Lord is Mars, it aspects its own. And then we have all these planets, Mercury, Saturn, Sun, Venus, aspecting the 11th house. So Mars is going to be very strong there. Sun is exalted there. So very strong, active group leadership, maybe difficulty expressing, I would say. very boisterous group here, generally speaking, of the groups in general. That may be true of the general populace of Turkey. I think it's also this particular group of um, leaders in the parliament at the time. I would say the difficulty in expressing is because Mercury is, how do I say, combust as Saturn as well. So there's like an internal suppression of speech here potentially. I mean, there's a lot of action, maybe even irritation at times or fighting because we have two fire planets and a movable fire sign, and this Aries in the 11th house. But then again, we have Venus to kind of smooth things over. That's what Venus does, right? It's a social grace diplomacy planet. Then the 12th house here, the Lord is Venus, and it's aspected by Jupiter. So this again, advising through protection of losses, also charitable as well, I would say. Jupiter is a charitable planet, and the 12th house can be related to charity. Um, so all this on this day, 20th of October 1923, rewrote new revisions to Constitution within 24 hours, voted unanimously to become Turkey's first president. And other things he was responsible for, introducing a Latin-based Turkish alphabet. He made education free and compulsory, gave women civil and political rights, and again, secularized, modernized the nation. So, this is all these huge, leaps forward, um, at the dawn of this new country here. So now what I was going to do is go through the subcharts to see, additional detail, but those subcharts are mostly used for timing. So we can see things from that perspective, not just a static perspective, but dynamic perspective. Okay, so as far as subzodiacs go, these subzodiacs, if you're not familiar, they're also called amshas or subdivisional charts. They derive from slicing and dicing up the main chart into smaller charts. And then basically what you first kind of pass analysis of these is that they're mostly used for timing. So you look at the birth dasha planets, for example, or the current dasha planets, which I've listed at the top and I've circled here. And then you see where they're located, positive, negative houses, and then you see their interaction, their strength, weakness, and their interaction with other planets to analyze, see what other information you can pull out of the chart. So the two charts I have on this slide are the Dashamsha D10 for career and reputation, and Ekadamsha D11 for income, public support, and elections, which I think probably were the two big categories or charts, subcharts to look at for this moment in time. But you can see the Dashamsha D10, Mars is not well placed. So just to remind you, the birth Dasha was Rahu, Jupiter, Venus, and the current Dasha is Sun, Venus, Jupiter, Mars. So they both have Jupiter, Venus, so that'll be the same, but the birth Dasha is Rahu, which is ambition, unusual ambition, and currently Sun, Mars, so more like military leadership, I would say, management, that sort of thing. Okay, so Mars is not well placed, but it aspects its own house in the 7th. So this is going to be a new innovative path. So it's really strong partners. The Lugna is a Swa Venus because there's a parivartana between Mercury and Venus here. So Venus will go to the top in its own sign where Saturn's exalted. So you're going to have Saturn exalted with the Swa Venus and Mercury almost like the main chart in Libra, right at the top here. So again, the career reputation for this moment in time is going to be this 5th house, again, which is that whole pravraja yoga. Then Jupiter's exalted, so the two two advising planets, Venus is Swa through Parivartana, Jupiter is exalted. So very strong advisements. But Jupiter, even though it's very strong, it's with Ketu. So again, that's kind of like redirecting spirituality. Like a kind of unusual spirituality, more than like a how would I say, like a traditional long-standing religion, because even though that would be Saturn, and Saturn's strong here because it's exalted in Libra, but Saturn's combust, and it'll carry that combustion into the subdivisional charts. So Then the Ekadamsha, D11 for income, public support, and elections. Well, Jupiter's not well placed. It does aspect its own sign in the second house where the sun is. So there's going to be a gifted leader speaker. Hello, Ataturk. And then we have Rahu and Ketu exalted with a Swam Mars in the disposer. I mean, this is like massive ambition, unusual, rebellious, action. Yeah. So there's a lot of support, regardless of whether it's the birth dasha or the current dasha. You can see like Sun, Mars, Rahu, those are all very strong. Especially in the second house. So a lot of speaking and a lot of, again, unusual engagement here. Jupiter's a little bit compromised, though, because it's with a debilitated Saturn, but it is still. Sorry, touched something in the slide, skipped forward. But I was saying that Jupiter, even though Jupiter is, not super strong in the sixth house here, it is aspecting its own sign in the second, so it will still support the second house, which again is assets, income, finance, and speech. All important things for a emerging country. Okay, then on this slide we have education, the D24, and assets, D4. So again, there are massive changes with education. So I assume that's what was going to come through this chart. And we do see, for example, I mentioned specifically, well, I said women's rights, and part of the rights actually that women received was like educational rights. But you can see in the middle of this chart we have Venus and Moon, which are the two female planets. But you see on either side of the Lugna here, we have Ketu Rahu with Jupiter, and then the other side, Mars and Sun. We have this massive Papkartra Yoga flanking the Lugna here. So because you have so many natural malefic planets flanking the Lugna, even though on paper there was all this like push, for free compulsory education, how much actually happened in the real world, I'm not really sure because there are clearly obstacles here. So again, it might have been more of a idea more than a action, it was clearly implemented. But you can see that again, Venus and Moon aspecting its own sign in Cancer there. That means that the top here is going to be very strong public education, but there's clearly obstacles as well. So the Chatra Chamsha D4 for assets, Rahu and Jupiter are not well placed. So you can see, the Birth Shah is probably more limited than currently, or maybe more challenged at the time. But Jupiter and Mars are in parivartana. That means you can exchange them and they're going to be stronger. So even though Jupiter's not well placed, it basically goes back to its sign. And again, that's in the fourth house, which is land. The other thing is that the Mars is going to go back to the third house of neighbors. And Mars in the third house creates a Karkobhavanasha Mars, meaning that there's going to be problems. Which again, like there's a lot of fighting going around. Turkey, which, most of the time Turkey managed to kind of sidestep, or try to be on the more diplomatic, try to bring, two sides together typically, often. But you can see that this Jupiter Mars is like, again, law, bridging neighbors and land, and that's what's going on here. So that's part of the assets, or one of the benefits that Turkey brings to different situations, is helping to smooth over diplomatic relations with troubled neighbors, I guess you could say. Strong troubled neighbors. Then on this side we have relationships of the D9 for spouse and partners, and D3 for siblings. So we have, let's see, an exalted Jupiter and a Sun, which are not well placed. We also have a Digbala directional strength Swa Venus. So very strong, again, advice going on here with partners. Mars is aspecting its own house in the 10th, so that's going to be transformative leadership. We have a exalted Saturn what did I write here? We have an exalted Saturn in the ninth house, but it's debilitated in the third. Okay, there you go. Debilitated in the third, which again is neighbors. So, again, I think Turkey tends to do what it can to smooth things over in that region of the world. And then we have Rahu in the seventh house, which is a path forward. So that's going to be unusual, ambitious path forward and partners as well. So yeah, so again, strong advisements, and ambition, and transformative leadership, kind of similar things here. Yeah, but you can see the partners here. Oh, no, not necessarily. Let me see. Hold on a second before I say anything. Yeah, like the Saturn and Mercury in the ninth house, again, you can't see those, but you will see the constellation there, which is Libra. So you might not, even with partners and stuff like that, you might not see all the players involved here. And Mercury is also the lord of the eighth house of, again, scandals and stuff like that. So that kind of mimics a bit the natal chart. Then the second chart here, we have a Drake and a D3 for siblings. Rahu's not well placed, and it's in the third house of neighbors and siblings. So again, ambitious, change and endings. And again, I think this is just Turkiye trying to mark its territory so that all these allies wouldn't divvy it up, and then Venus and Mercury are in parivartana, so they're both going to be strong. So that's going to be very strong lugna here. We're going to have, again, exalted Saturn in Libra with Venus in its own sign, and Mercury. So it's happening again. So this, I would say, the siblings, which in my mind as a country, siblings are probably like neighboring states or neighboring countries that kind of developed alongside, in parallel, with the country of that we're talking about here. You can see the siblings, though, are, unlike Turkey, are very religious, I would say. Yeah, so it's a strong contrast. And, clearly there's an integration here between religion and government going on here. So then this slide, we have the D7 for children and the D12 for parents, grandparents. Now, again, since we're talking about country, I see this as like children as like future generations and parents, grandparents as previous generations. So on the D7, we have an exalted Rahu in the third house, not well placed, but the third house is related to changes and endings. So there's like an ambition to change things for future generations. But look at this. We have Jupiter and Venus in parivartana. The two advisement planets are basically in their own sign. So government and grandchildren in the ninth house here, strong, unusual advisors and partners. So this is clearly going to be a benefit for future generations from this 1923 time. There may still be issues with relationships because Venus is Karkobhavanasha in the seventh house. So that can indicate problems with relationships. But since Jupiter's coming back there, it's going to smooth over probably most of what Venus is doing there. On the negative side, then the D12 here, all the grahas are well placed. We have a Swa Rahu plus Mars, Moon, Venus in the fourth house. This is like somebody who's like rooted in the past, like almost digging in their heels. So I think this is like the contrast between the younger generation, the older generation. Probably the younger generation was all about like, yeah, let's create a secular, world and a country. And then the older generation was like, no, you want to stick to our roots, Then we have here an exalted Saturn with Mercury again in Libra. So this is loss of more formal religion and ideology, I would say. Even though we're not running those planets, but just a general overview of this chart. Jupiter's aspecting its own sign in the fifth house. So this can be, a spiritual leader. And then we have Moon, Mars, KT, Venus in the 10th house. So that's going to be, those are the two emotional planets with, again, Mars and Ketu, like a disruptive, emotional, nervous kind of advice and actions going on here. So I think this really like tousled the older generation because it was just so new and so innovative and unconventional to what they had known as a, because was it the Ottoman Empire lasted what, over 600 years? And then he's just like turning it all on its head, they you keep saying he because again it seemed like it was all Ataturk, and maybe that's just the way the history is written, but I'm sure other people were more involved, but maybe that's part of his mystique as well. It's like, oh, he did everything. And it seems, just reading it, not being there myself, it sounded like it, so maybe. Then on this chart, this slide, we have the health amshas, which again, it seemed like there were a lot of health issues. Um, Again, if it was a person's chart, I'd be like, yeah, clearly I would be looking at like health and gut issues and um, mental health issues. And again, those are all true for Ataturk himself. But let's see. So we have the D6 for acute issues at the top, D8 for chronic issues in the middle, and the D27 for strength and resilience. So in the D6, all grahas are well placed. So again, in that moment, probably because that Venus was, you know, pucking all those challenge planets in, you know, probably looked pretty good. But you can see that there's a debilitated Saturn in the 11th house and it's aspecting the sun. So a lot of structural issues, and then that debilitated Saturn is with Mercury. So again, you have those three planets related to different parts of the nervous system. So Saturn is kind of pinching Sun, is the way I was kind of seeing it. So there's still some problem with general health, which is what Sun represents, but also literally the president. The Sun also represents heart and bones, which again, he had broken bones and he also had heart issues. And then the fifth house here is Libra again. Oh, and this is I didn't mention that. That's also Vargota Malugna. And so it's the same rising sign as the main chart. So even though the planets are well placed, this is important here because you're getting information about, you know, um, again, the health issues. So the fifth house here, the Lord is again Libra, or the constellation is Libra. The Lord of it is Venus, and Venus is gone 12 houses away where it's debilitated. So that means there's going to be like losses here due to fifth house issues, which is can be advisement, but I was specifically seeing like, the fifth house is related to heart and upper GI. So yeah. Then the D8 here, Rahu and Venus are now all placed, and again, those are the main planets for the birth dasha. So now we're getting more issues with the chronic issues, which was the case for him, Ataturk. But see, we still got some protection here because Mars is Swa at the top, so he's going to be a very strong leader. And you have a Swa Venus and Swa Jupiter creating a subchart yoga, positive protection, around the lugna here. The sun, though, is Karko Bhavanasha in the ninth house. That means there's issues, with the president. That could be like medical issues, for example. And then look at the sixth house. The sixth house is kind of nasty looking. It's got debilitated Saturn with a Swa K2 and Rahu and Mercury. I mean, this is a lot of mental health issues, weird structural mental issues going on here. And the Saturn is aspecting the eighth house of chronic issues. So even though there's a lot of protection here and it all looks good, and this, especially this Jupiter Swan, Venus Swan, it's almost like these angel wings protecting this transformative leader. That's what I'm seeing. But underneath, there's a lot of, issues going on here medically. And then even the sun, Karkobawan, I mean, difficulties. So, like, it all looks pretty good. I mean, he ran this whole show, and then 2 weeks later, he's got like 2 heart attacks. I mean, clearly, that doesn't just happen, that, your body builds up to that. So then we have the Vamsha D27 for strength and resilience. Well, Rahu's not well placed, and it's in the 8th house. So again, Rahu can indicate mental health issues. So deep chronic, since it's in the 8th house, worries, obsession, deep psychology. And then we have Jupiter, Venus, Mars in the 10th house. So again, we're still leading, diplomacy, advice, and that sort of thing. But you can see nothing in this chart is particularly strong. Nothing is swa, right? Nothing's parivartana. So, again, there are supports, there's props to keep things going, like in the main chart with that Venus, like holding that fifth house all together and all those, compromised planets. And you can see that in the D6 and the D8. But, again, Rahu being in the eighth house here, it's like, and it was the main dasha period, mahadasha period, and the sub period there. Um, Even though he might have looked strong and, charismatic or whatever, you want to call Atatürk, like, it seems like he was really in pain, physically and mentally, while he was doing all this. So that's what I'm seeing here. And then, spirituality worship, since that was like part of the, plan here to shift that. So we have the Panchamsha D5 for innate spirituality, then the Vimshamsha D20 for organized worship, more kind of traditional, I would say, religion, it's D20. So in the top here, we have a Swa Jupiter. It's not well placed, and it's in the 12th house, which is the house of like, remote places and things like that. And it's with the moon. So, privately worshiping, like, and offering your spiritual feelings and thoughts in private is what I'm seeing here. And that Jupiter is the lord of the ninth house of authority. So this is like a government that's, again, they practice or whatever religion or spiritual thing they want, but in private. They're not bringing it onto the stage, political stage. Then again, we have a Karkana Bhavanasha sun again. So we keep seeing, like, I think all the Karka Bhavanashas in this chart have been like sun, right? I have to go back and count, but I think there's been like 3 or 4 of them. So the sun again represents presence, and Karka Bhavanasha is like issues with provenance, such as mental health, medical, or just not having a president, if we're talking about a country. Um, and then again, we have this very strong exalted Saturn, although it's combust, so you can't see it. There's like these, very rickety structural degradation going on internally related to both the president and the government. So the larger body and the individual person. Um, Rahu is Swa here in the uh, 11th house of clubs, groups, and society. So this is going to be giving like unusual advice here because it's with Venus. Again, this is like going against, long-standing tradition here is to, again, separate church and state, or church and mosque, I guess, in this case. So then the D20, Rahu, Jupiter, Sun, not well placed. So again, since this moment in time was all about separating traditional worship from politics, it's not surprising that we have all these planets that are not well placed. But the thing is, there's still spirituality there. I mean, Jupiter is in its own sign in the uh, eighth house here. So there is spirituality. It's just not shared. It's not public. And like even in the main chart, right, we had Jupiter in the sixth house aspecting the, was it 10th? That's still a lot of spirituality, strong spirituality, but again, not in the traditional, because it used to be the spiritual law or the religious law was sometimes the political law or interwoven with the political law. And in this case, it was like, no, we're not doing that. We're having a civil, secular leadership here. Um, yeah, so it's, what else do we have here? What did I say? End, hidden, public. So yeah, this Swa Jupiter in the eighth house, again, there is deep spirituality here, but the spirituality of the leader, sun and moon, public, is not public. It's in the eighth house of hidden, you know, uh, hidden kind of thoughts, deep psychology. Yeah. So, Okay, so that was the national birth chart for Turkey. Hope you enjoyed that. As always, I thank you so much for all your support with my work in the channel. You know, everybody's like liking videos and subscribing, and you know, chatting with me in the comments and that sort of thing. Some people are sending in donations, so thank you for all of that. It's very much appreciated. Again, all of my teaching videos are in my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For more famous charts, you can check out my birth charts archive list 2025 video, where I list all the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. Because actually, most of the famous charts I analyze are not one-off videos like this. So, you know, like my monthly videos, I typically analyze 3 different famous charts, but you would never know from the title or the thumbnail if there are any famous charts in there. So yeah, if that's your thing, you know, if you like to learn astrology that way. Also, I do offer individual birth chart readings, or if you like an application for my astrology classes, you can email heartlightash@yahoo.com. And I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, as well as yoga, homeopathy, and naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you. So as always, I hope you found this chart helpful, or this talk, maybe both, since it's a dual chart. Helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so until the next one, take care. Namaste.